بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. In our last lesson, we started to speak about the first Palestinian intifada. And the word intifada, it means uprising. So the Palestinians, they made this uprising against the occupying Israeli aggression. So the first intifada started in December of 1987. And that intifada was started by the new organization that was formed around the same time, and that organization is known as Hamas. Hamas was formed at the end of 1987, and that is the same period of time in which this first Palestinian intifada began. So it started in late 1987 at the hands of Hamas. Now the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, that was considered the official face of Palestine. And it was headed by Yasser Arafat. The PLO, they tried to hijack this movement. They tried to hijack the Intifada and use it as a bargaining chip. But they were unable to gain control of the situation. The PLO was unable to gain control of what was going on with this intifada. So there was friction between the PLO and Hamas. They had different ideologies, they had different objectives, and these two organizations did not get along. So Hamas started the intifada, the PLO tried to hijack it for their own purposes, but they were unable to do so. So the intifada, it went on for months, and then those months became years. And at the height of the intifada, when the PLO, when the Palestine Liberation Organization realized that they would not be able to take control of the situation, they tried a new tactic. They tried to invite Hamas to join a preparatory committee for the Palestinian National Council. So that was basically what they wanted to become the parliament of the Palestinian state. But the Palestinian state that they wanted to form did not even exist yet, right? Israel had control of all of the land. The PLO, they wanted to establish a Palestinian state, but they hadn't been able to do so. And now they're inviting Hamas to be part of a committee that prepares a legislative body, a parliament for the Palestinian state, even though that Palestinian state did not even exist yet. Hamas refused to do this. They refused to join this preparatory committee. They knew that this is a tactic, that this is a trick from the PLO to try to gain control of the situation. So Hamas refused to join this preparatory committee, and one of the reasons they gave for their refusal to join this committee was because this committee itself, this committee that was going to organize the Palestinian parliament for the future Palestinian state, this committee was not an elected committee. Rather, this committee, it was hand-picked. The members of this committee were hand-picked by none other than Yasser Arafat himself. So Hamas, they felt that they would not have adequate representation because the committee that was going to oversee the preparation of this parliament, this committee consisted of hand-picked members by Yasser Arafat himself. So this was one of the reasons Hamas refused to join this council. Also, one of the reasons that they did not join they did not join hands with the PLO was because the charter of the PLO, now we mentioned here that the PLO and Hamas had different ideologies. The PLO was not calling for an Islamic state. The PLO was calling for a secular state. Yasser Arafat and the PLO, they wanted to form a secular Palestinian state. Whereas Hamas, their goal was for the Palestinian state to be a state that is ruled under Islamic Sharia. So very differing ideologies. That is why Hamas, this is one of the reasons why Hamas did not want to join hands with the PLO. So Hamas demanded something very clear. Hamas, they made it very clear that first, if there's going to be any cooperation between Hamas and the PLO, first the PLO must withdraw its recognition of Israel. Yasser Arafat and the PLO, they officially recognized the Israeli state. And this is something that Hamas completely rejected. So the PLO said, if you want us to cooperate, Hamas said to the PLO, if you want us to cooperate with you, then you must withdraw your recognition of Israel. And you have to declare, Hamas is demanding to the PLO, that you must declare that all of Palestine, from the river to the sea, meaning from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Jordan River on the east and the Mediterranean Sea on the west, that all of Palestine, from the river to the sea, and also from the north, all the way from Naqura in the north, all the way to Rafah in the south, all of this, from the east to the west and from the north to the south, all of that is Palestinian land, and it belongs only to the Palestinian people, and Israel has no right to even 1 inch of that land. This is what Hamas told the PLO. If you want us to cooperate with you in any way, then you must withdraw your recognition of Israel, and you must declare that all of Palestine is solely for the Palestinian people. And an Israeli state does not have the right to exist on this land. And of course, Yasser Arafat, he rejected this. He did not accept this. And this council, this preparatory council, it went ahead, but of course without Hamas. Hamas refused to take part in that council. All right. Now, a few years into the Intifada, in August of 1990, a big event happened. In August of 1990, the Iraqi army went into Kuwait. They invaded Kuwait. The president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, his forces invaded Kuwait. This was August of 1990. And this is something that caused great turmoil in the whole Arab world. The Arab world was divided. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, the Arab world was divided. Some, they stood on the side of Saddam Hussein, they supported him, and others, they were against him. As for Yasser Arafat and the PLO, which side did they take? They chose the side of Saddam Hussein. Yasser Arafat and the PLO, they chose the side of Saddam Hussein. They were supporting Saddam Hussein. But Hamas, on the other hand, Hamas, they opposed Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. And they said, if we support this, if we support Iraq invading Kuwait, if we support Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait, then this will open the doors for foreign armies to enter our lands. This will open the doors for foreign armies to come and enter the Arab lands. So PLO, they sided with Saddam Hussein, and Hamas was against Saddam Hussein. So even within Palestine, there were disagreements regarding this issue. And Jewish groups during this period of time, they try to take advantage of the situation, that there's a lot of turmoil going on in the Arab world. Everyone is focused on what Iraq is doing to Kuwait, right? So they saw this as an opportunity. The eyes are kind of off Palestine now. everyone's eyes, the international community, their eyes are on Iraq and Kuwait. So some Jewish groups within Jerusalem, they decided to go into Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and lay a cornerstone of their so-called temple in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. They decided to go into Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and lay a cornerstone of Haykal Sulaiman. That's the so-called temple that the Jews say was on the site where Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa stands. Right? So by laying a cornerstone in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa for their Haykal Sulaiman, for this temple, what does that really mean? That means that they want to destroy Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Their plan is to destroy Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and to build upon that piece of land their temple. So they actually went into Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and they tried to lay a cornerstone of this so-called temple inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And of course the Muslim guards who were there around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, they resisted. And then there were clashes that erupted right there in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So on October 8th, 1990, and this is the third year of the Intifada. The Intifada had been going on for about 3 years at this point. So October 8th, 1990, this group, this Jewish extremist group known as the Temple Mount Faithful, right? That's what they call the structure that they want to build, the Temple Mount. Also known as Haykal Sulaiman, the Temple of Sulaiman, right? So this group, they were known as the Temple Mount Faithful. They entered Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and they tried to lay a cornerstone for this temple inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So of course, this led to an escalation between the Muslim guards and the Israeli border police. And the Israeli forces, they're the ones who have the guns. The Muslim guards in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, there are Muslim guards there, but they don't have weapons. They're not allowed to carry weapons, the Palestinian guards around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. But as for the Israeli border police that are all around the area, they have big guns, right? So the Israeli police, they responded with force. And they used live ammunition from their guns. And this violence, it resulted in the martyrdom of more than 50 Palestinians, and around 150 more were injured, right? So this took place in October of 1990. Now after this event took place, and more than 50 Palestinians were killed right there in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, right? This was a huge deal. So the UN Security Council, the useless UN, right, who make all of their resolutions and this and that, and then nobody cares. The UN Security Council, they condemned this violence, and they condemned the actions of the Israeli security forces using live ammunition on the Palestinians and killing more than 50 Palestinians. The UN condemned it. They condemned it. And they requested an investigation, right? But Israel rejected this UN resolution, as they always do. And they refused to cooperate with the UN. And that was it. That was the end of it, right? So you see how useless the UN is in these things. Right? Israel can just say, no, we refuse to cooperate. And then the UN says, okay, what can we do? That's it. Right? And that's what happened. It was swept under the rug. Right? So this took place while the Gulf War was going on. So these Zionists, they used the distraction of the Gulf War as an opportunity to escalate their agenda within Palestine. All right, now as for the Gulf War and its consequences on Palestine, they were very severe, right? Palestine used to receive a lot of financial aid from the wealthy Gulf states, right? The Gulf states are wealthy states. They have a lot of money. And they used to support Palestine. They used to send financial aid to the PLO. But Because of the Gulf War, this massive financial aid from these Gulf states to the PLO and to the Palestinian people, it collapsed. They stopped receiving financial aid. So they took a very hard economic hit. Also, anger in Gulf societies turned very sharply towards the Palestinians. The Arabs in the Gulf states, they were very angry with the Palestinians because the PLO, Yasser Arafat, who's considered the official face of Palestine, he was openly supporting Saddam Hussein. So of course, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states, they were very angry with this. Like how is he supporting Saddam Hussein? So anger towards the Palestinians, it grew in these Gulf societies, right? So this is something that had a very bad backlash as well. And because of this, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from these Gulf states because they considered this a betrayal. The Gulf rulers considered the official stance of the PLO to be a betrayal towards them. We're helping you, we're sending you financial aid, we're sending you money, we're supporting you, and then you support the one who wants to invade our lands? You're supporting Saddam Hussein? So because of this, they were very angry and they expelled hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their lands. So many Palestinians were expelled from Kuwait and other Gulf countries as well during this time period. In 1991, while the Gulf War was still going on, Saddam Hussein, he was firing Scud missiles into Israel, and he also fired some of these missiles into Saudi Arabia as well. Right? His goal was to invade Kuwait, and then his goal was to move to Saudi Arabia as well. Right? So he was firing missiles at Israel, and he was also firing missiles into Saudi Arabia as well during this time period. So the Palestinians cheered the missile strikes of Saddam Hussein into Israel. They were happy with this and they were cheering this. But the Gulf rulers, they were very offended with this because they thought that they were also cheering for the strikes on Saudi Arabia because they were happening simultaneously. So Saddam Hussein is firing missiles into Israel and Saudi Arabia at the same time. The Palestinians are cheering. They were cheering for the missiles that were directed towards Israel. But the Arab countries they felt that they were cheering at the missiles being aimed at them as well. So they became very upset and very angry at this as well. So this caused a lot of mistrust between Palestinians and the Arab Gulf nations. All right, now during this period of time, this is about 3 years into the Intifada, going into the 4th year, right? By this time, the Intifada started to lose momentum and it was starting to become weak. Right? One of the reasons why it started to become weak was because of the brutal Israeli repression, right? The way that the Israeli forces were suppressing any uprising and any rebellion of the Palestinians, the Israelis were known to be very severe and very harsh in their repression. So after 3 years of this Israeli repression, the Intifada, it started to lose its steam. Also, 3 years going into the 4th year, the Palestinian people themselves, they were exhausted. Right? Almost 4 years of this uprising. 3 years completed, going into the 4th year. Of course, it takes its toll. So the Intifada had started to lose its momentum by 1991. Also, Israel, they arrested Hamas leadership. Hamas, it had multiple tiers of leadership. The first tier and second tier, third tier, right? So one of the Israeli strategies to weaken the uprising and to weaken the Intifada was to arrest Hamas leadership. So first they arrested many of the top leaders. Then when all of the top leaders were in jail, the second tier of leadership, they took command. Then they were arrested as well. Then the third tier of leadership, they took command. Until the seventh tier of Hamas leadership was eventually running the movement. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth tier of leadership, they were all arrested. Right? Now the seventh tier of Hamas leadership was leading the movement, and of course they don't have as much influence and they don't have as much resources as the upper tiers. So because of this, the Intifada, it started to lose its momentum and its steam as well. All right. On October 30th, 1991, the Madrid Peace Conference took place in Spain. So Arab leaders from Jordan, from Egypt, and other Arab leaders, they sat for the first time with Israel at the same table in Madrid. And this conference was organized by the United States and the Soviet Union. So the Arab leaders and Israel, they sat at the table in Madrid. And there were Palestinians who were present at that conference. And they made clear what the stance of Hamas was. The Palestinians, they wanted to make clear to those who were present at the conference what Hamas demands. So Hamas declared its stance very clearly. They said that the armed struggle, armed resistance, that is our main strategy. We're willing to sit at the table and discuss things, but our main form of resistance will be armed resistance. So they made that very clear. Also, they made it clear that they will not interfere. Hamas made it clear that we don't want to interfere with the affairs of any other country. We're not going to get involved in the affairs of other Arab states or other foreign countries. No, we have nothing to do with that. Our operations will only target the occupying force, which is Israel, right? So their ideology was basically Palestine first. You know, we focus only on Palestine. We're not going to get involved in the affairs of other countries. So they made this very clear. All right, in 1992, as these negotiations dragged on, the military wing of Hamas was created, and that is known as the Izzuddin al-Qassam Brigades, and it's still active today, the Izzuddin al-Qassam Brigades. So now, this military wing, they were able to carry out some small but effective and painful military operations inside of occupied Palestine. So Hamas was becoming more organized as the years went by. Now at the same time, while all this was going on, while Hamas was using armed resistance to try to reclaim Palestine, at the same time while this was going on, the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and Israel were secretly sitting at the negotiating table in Oslo, in Norway. There were secret negotiations going on between the PLO and Israel, and these secret negotiations went on for about a year and a half. Right? And this was done behind the curtains, these negotiations. All right. While these negotiations were still going on, in December of 1992, Israel forcibly expelled more than 400 leaders of Hamas. They forcibly expelled them from the land and dumped them into the wilderness of southern Lebanon in a place that is known as Marj az-Zuhur. Right? They literally rounded them up and they took them into Lebanon and they dumped them there. Right? And they left them there with no food, no shelter, no water. They left them in the wilderness. They literally just took them and dumped them into the wilderness in southern Lebanon. And these deportees, They refused to relocate to any other country. They said, no, our home is Palestine and we will only go back to Palestine. So they set up a camp, and from there they spoke to the world and they declared their commitment to the Intifada, and they declared their commitment to reclaiming every inch of Palestine. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, while all this was going on, in Lebanon, Hezbollah was striking the Israeli army and the allied militias, the militias that were allied to Israel in the south of Lebanon. Hezbollah was striking at them, and they were able to inflict heavy losses upon them. So that was going on in southern Lebanon. The Israeli forces were being hit in southern Lebanon. And within Palestine, the Izzuddin al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, they were striking inside Palestine. In one operation, they were able to kill 16 Israeli soldiers and settlers, right? So that was a big deal. And this actually shook Israel's sense of safety. Right? So all of these things were going on around that time period. December of 1992. All right, a few months later in 1993, on September 13th, 1993, the world was stunned when the PLO officially recognized Israel. Now it's all official. The PLO, they officially recognized Israel, and the Oslo Accords were signed. And this was done in Washington, D.C., at a ceremony at the White House in the presence of the President of the United States at that time, Bill Clinton. These Oslo Accords, which were the result of the secret negotiations that had been taking place in Oslo for the past couple of years before this. The result of that was the signing of the Oslo Accords in Washington, D.C. between Yasser Arafat, representing the PLO, and Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, representing Israel. So the two of them, they signed the Oslo Accords in the presence of Bill Clinton at the White House in Washington, D.C. Now, the terms of these accords, the Oslo Accords, was really very, very shameful. What the PLO agreed to, it was really a shame. The agreement stated that Israel will give the PLO limited self-rule. That we will give you limited self-rule in Gaza and the city of Ariha, the city of Jericho. That's it. Gaza and the city of Jericho only. That's just about 2% of historic Palestine. And Yasser Arafat, he agreed to this. That, okay, we will have Gaza, and it's not even full rule of Gaza. It's limited rule in Gaza and Ariha. And Israel basically has the rest of the land. So of course, Islamic movements around the world, they condemn these accords. How could you agree to this? This is a great betrayal, that you are officially recognizing that Israel has the right to the rest of the Palestinian land, and you are conceding and taking just a small portion, and you're not even going to have full control over that small portion. It's a limited type of self-rule. How can you agree to this? So Islamic movements around the world, they condemned these Oslo Accords. And in Damascus, in Syria, there were 9 Palestinian factions which formed a united front against this betrayal. And the reason why the Muslim world rejected the Oslo Accords, for many reasons, as you can see. One of the reasons was because it called for a halt to jihad. It called for an end to any armed resistance. And there were scholars from around the Muslim world, including Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Muhammad al-Ghazali, Mustafa Mashhur, and so many others, that issued fatwas during this time period forbidding any concession on Palestine. That it's not permissible for us to concede and say that Israel has the right to this land and we are giving up our rights to this land. This is haram. right? So these Oslo Accords, they gave Israel 78% of Palestine permanently. According to the terms of these accords, 78% of Palestine was given to Israel permanently. And the PLO agreed that we will never try to take this land back. This is yours forever. Right? How could they agree to such a thing? Also, in the Oslo Accords, Jerusalem was left out. Right? These accords said that Jerusalem, the refugees and settlements, right, illegal Israeli settlements, that's not part of this. That will be discussed later. These accords do not cover that, right? So that was not covered. And as we mentioned, even the little rule that Israel supposedly gave to Palestine over Gaza and Ariha and Jericho, right? It did not give them the right to have an army. Like, you have limited self-rule over these pieces of land, but you don't have the right to make an army. So what type of rule is this if you can't even have an army? You don't have the right to have an army, and you don't have legislative independence. If you don't have a legislature and you don't have an army, then what type of rule is that? That's not really rule, right? So these Oslo Accords, they were completely in favor of Israel, and the Palestinians got nothing from it except humiliation, right? And this was what was agreed upon by the PLO and Yasser Arafat. So it was really, really a shame, right? These Oslo Accords really, it just turned the PLO basically into basically a security subcontractor for the Israeli occupation. The PLO became like a subcontractor for Israel. That's what it really was, in effect, right? So this was in September of 1993 when these shameful Oslo Accords were signed. So inshallah we'll stop there for today, bi'idhnillah, and inshallah next week we'll continue with more on the history of the Holy Land, bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullahu khaira, wa barakallahu feekum, wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Yes, brother.